Lost Trust in Berlin. Chapter 1. A New Adventure. My name is Sophie, and I am from London. Traveling has always been my passion, and Berlin was at the top of my list. I had been dating Daniel, a German-British man, for over a year, and he often spoke fondly of his hometown. When he suggested I visit Berlin while he was away on a business trip, I hesitated at first. But he assured me that his family home would be safe, and his older brother Lucas would be there to host me. It sounded like the perfect opportunity to explore a new city. As my plane landed at Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, I felt a wave of excitement. The city was full of history, culture, and endless places to explore. Lucas met me at the airport with a friendly smile. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with confidence. He took my suitcase and insisted on driving me to the house. The house was elegant, with a blend of modern and traditional German architecture. Lucas showed me my room and made sure I was comfortable. He even cooked dinner, making me feel welcomed. At dinner, we talked about Berlin's history and the places I wanted to visit. Lucas was charming, but I noticed how often his eyes lingered on me. He complimented my looks several times, and while his words seemed harmless, something about his tone made me uneasy. I convinced myself that I was overthinking. After all, he was Daniel's brother, and I was just a guest. Chapter 2. Exploring the City. The next morning, Lucas offered to take me on a personal tour of Berlin. We started with the Brandenburg Gate, its grand structure standing as a symbol of Germany's past. Then, we walked through the Berlin Wall Memorial, where the tragic history of division still echoed through the remnants. Lucas was a great guide, explaining the historical significance of every place we visited. I started to relax, thinking that maybe my initial discomfort was misplaced. We stopped for lunch at a small cafe near Alexanderplatz. Lucas was attentive, making sure I had everything I needed. But then, he began asking personal questions about my relationship with Daniel. "Are you really happy with him?" he asked, leaning closer. "You deserve someone who can give you more attention." His words caught me off guard. I laughed nervously, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, but his gaze remained fixed on me. As the day went on, Lucas became bolder. At one point, while taking a selfie near the East Side Gallery, he put his arm around my waist and held on a little too long. My stomach twisted with discomfort. He was Daniel's brother. This wasn't supposed to happen. I decided to ignore it, hoping I was misinterpreting his actions. But deep inside, a strange feeling was growing. Chapter 3. A Sudden Change in Atmosphere. That evening, Lucas invited me to watch a movie in the living room. I was hesitant but didn't want to be rude. As the movie played, he sat too close. His leg brushed against mine, and his arm rested along the back of the couch, almost touching my shoulders. I shifted away slightly, but he noticed and smirked. "Relax, Sophie," he said softly, his voice lower than before. I felt my heartbeat quicken. His behavior was making me anxious, but I didn't want to cause tension. I pretended to be sleepy and excused myself to my room. As I closed the door, I let out a breath of relief. But as I lay in bed, my mind raced. Was I imagining things? Or was Lucas really crossing the line? I decided to lock my door that night, just in case. Hours later, I heard soft footsteps outside my door. My body tensed as I saw the shadow of feet standing still under the gap of the door. My heart pounded in my chest. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the shadow disappeared. I barely slept that night, realizing that something was terribly wrong. Chapter 4. Unwanted Advances. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but Lucas was different. He seemed amused, almost as if he knew I was afraid. At breakfast, He casually mentioned that Daniel wouldn't be able to call for a few days due to work. "Looks like it's just us for now," he said, smiling. His words made me feel trapped. That afternoon, I went out alone, visiting the Berlin Cathedral and Checkpoint Charlie. Being outside helped me clear my mind, but the moment I returned to the house, the tension returned. Lucas asked if I wanted wine. I declined, making an excuse that I was tired. He laughed. "Come on, Sophie, don't be so boring." His persistence made my skin crawl. As I walked toward my room, he suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Why are you acting so distant?" he asked, his grip firm. My body froze. "Let go, Lucas," I said, my voice shaking. He smirked but finally released me. I rushed to my room, locking the door again. My hands were trembling. I needed to leave, but where would I go? Chapter 5. Desperate for escape. That night, I barely slept. I searched for hotels nearby, but most were either too expensive or fully booked. I considered calling Daniel, but I didn't want to cause family drama. The next morning, I made up my mind. I would pack my bags and leave. As I started packing, a knock on the door made me jump. "Sophie, open up," Lucas called. I stayed silent. After a few moments, he sighed and walked away. I knew I had to get out before things escalated. I waited until he left for work before grabbing my suitcase and heading out. I booked a room at a hotel near Potsdamer Platz and finally felt safe. But my relief was short-lived. Later that evening, I received a text from Lucas. "Running away won't change anything. You'll see." My hands shook as I deleted the message. Chapter 6. Seeking help. Terrified, I contacted Daniel and told him everything. His reaction was a mix of anger and disbelief. "Lucas wouldn't do that," he said at first. But as I explained the details, his tone changed. "I'll handle this," he promised. The next morning, I received another message from Lucas. "You made a mistake." My heart pounded. I decided to go to the local police station. The officers listened carefully and advised me to stay at a different location. They assured me that they would look into the situation. That night, Daniel called me. I confronted Lucas. He denied everything, but I don't trust him anymore. "Stay safe, Sophie." His words made me realize how fragile trust could be. Chapter 7. Leaving Berlin. I decided to cut my trip short. I booked a flight back to London. As I waited at the airport, I kept looking over my shoulder, fearing that Lucas might appear. When I finally boarded the plane, I felt a wave of relief. Landing in London, I finally exhaled. My family welcomed me back, noticing the stress on my face. I told them everything. They were furious and supportive, encouraging me to move forward. Days later, Daniel called again. I confronted my parents. Lucas admitted what he did but downplayed it. "I can't believe I ever trusted him." His voice was filled with regret. Chapter 8. Healing from the trauma. The experience haunted me for weeks. I struggled with fear, guilt, and anger. Therapy helped, and so did the support from my loved ones. I realized that it wasn't my fault. Lucas had manipulated and harassed me. Daniel and I eventually broke up. The situation had changed everything. I couldn't be with someone whose family had hurt me. It was painful but necessary. Berlin had been my dream destination, but now, it was a place tied to a dark memory. Yet, I refused to let fear control me. I was still a traveler, and I wouldn't let one experience take away my love for exploring the world.